I was asked to speak on how to care for children who have suffered developmental trauma through adoption or foster placement. And in 10 minutes, I'm going to give you the best answer possible that I can. And that is to do one very important thing, and to see life through the eyes of trauma. It means getting down into the perspective of the child. What we've done too often is gone from an adult perspective and tried to get children into our arena instead of jumping into their arena, into where they are seeing. And Dr. Van der Kolk talked a lot about that, how children's perspectives change, and that's really where I'm going to take off from that and develop that a little bit further. However, the one thing I really want to do is make sure that my audience is in sync with me, and that there's movement, because you all have been sitting here for a while, so we're going to make that happen for a minute here.
I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. You like to move it. I like to move it, move it.
That's right. Go ahead and stand up for a second.
I like to move it, move it. You like to move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. You like to move it. I like to.
Excellent. All right. You know, the one thing about attachment is that you are supposed to have fun. Joy is the key to attachment. And so being very serious about all this, we have to have a little joy in between it all. So what I like to do when I start my trainings is to introduce my two favorite fictitious children. And my first child is Andy. Andy is the child that's depicted by the picture, which is your average child that has a pretty good, predictable life, a life that is there's this nurturing, there's connection, there's emotional stability in that life. And that's not the children we're talking about today, is it? The child that we're talking about today or tomorrow is going to be who? Yeah, it's Billy. And Billy's foundation has been broken. Billy's foundation, due to something in that history, and it's not just adoption and foster care. As I've done my work, it's been interesting to see how it's expanded to a lot of biological kids as well, because our families are under a lot of stress, and there's divorce, and there's chaos, and there's moves, and there's medical trauma. And so we have to really start looking at our kids from that perspective. And that's why I love that the title of this conference is Changing the Paradigm, where we've got to look that this is about trauma. We can put a diagnosis on it, but from a day in and day out basis, the underlying piece we have to keep looking at is trauma. And why is that different? So why is Andy so much different than little Billy? And so I'm going to do a little graphical depiction of that. Andy's family, and when we talk about family, we have to get back to the whole sense that that's where it all starts. This is where the basis of every one of our beginnings is. Who you are today is truly based off your family, either because of it or despite of it. And so no matter how much work you've done around it. But Andy's family is, and I'm going to put up, just hold with me, it's a traditional family, but I really think that that is something that creates a lot of stability with a two-parent household. And you then have Andy, and you've got sister and a brother, and there's a hierarchy to this family. And so when Andy grows up, his definition of knowing what family is what? It's about safety. We've heard that word today. Security. Family is about forever. It's unconditional. Unconditional love, unconditional acceptance. It's a safe base. And you can go through this whole incredible list. And to Andy, that's just what's normal. So Andy believes that the world is safe. He believes that he's okay. In fact, what we have to do as good parents with Andy is actually teach him that the world is unsafe, not to go up to strangers, that there's a level of fear we kind of have to instill just to be safe around our kids with Andy. But when you take this model and you say, well, what does Billy's life look like? Well, Billy comes from a family, as you see, the foundation is a lean-to. And maybe there's a mom and dad, but the connection really isn't there. And it's very kind of scattered. Then Billy comes along. Well, and then what happens? Well, then dad kind of moves out of the picture, and then mom's a single mom, but then she brings in dad number two. So then Billy's got another adult in charge of him. And through all of this, he's creating this experience of vulnerability, because then sister comes along, and then Billy's kind of pushed around a little bit. Maybe he's sexually abused. Maybe there's not enough food. All these factors that we have to take in consideration of where those early beginnings and those early childhood experiences are going to mold this child, and not just from a physiological standpoint, as we know from the brain, but also a belief system. And the belief system, I think, of our children is something we've really, really missed to see, that they don't believe that they're lovable, they don't believe they're okay, because then dad's gone, the second dad's gone, and then all of a sudden we've got, well, he's not really dad, he's kind of a boyfriend, he's gone on the outside, but sure enough, little brother shows up. And all this kind of chaos is happening, and then dad moves out of the picture, then mom finds out, oh no, I can't handle this, she's got 3 kids now. And so she kind of disappears. And now who's in charge? Billy. Billy's 7 years old, and he's in charge of whom? His little brother and sister. And he's digging through trash cans trying to find food. And so he doesn't understand what a family is. He doesn't understand that adults are supposed to be in charge. And in fact, he's kind of in charge of mom, which is a really unhealthy family system. So this should look and sound familiar, but I think the graphic depiction of it really starts helping us to comprehend what then Billy's definition of family is. And his words in his mind becomes what? Family is chaos. It's about drugs, alcohol, fear, unpredictability. You don't know where your next meal is going to be. And the whole entire list. And what I do with kids when we work with families is to help kids understand then what their family blueprint look like. Because even though you can move a child into a home, if they're coming with a blueprint like that, it's going to be very difficult. And so let's say in this depiction with Billy that all of a sudden we do move in, we take this child into foster care, we have, unfortunately though, grandma comes along, which is great, but grandma's only going to take how many kids? 2, because Billy's a handful. So the other 2 kids go, and now what does Billy's family look like? He's on his own. And so now we take Billy and we put him where? Oh, we put him into Andy's home. And we think everything's going to be okay because Andy has a loving, delightful, nurturing home with everything. But the problem is, Billy's stressed out. He's completely wired differently. He sees things differently. His physiology is different. And if we don't understand this as professionals and as parents, then we forget to really see the 3 words that I really stress with parents and professionals is that this is a child that lives in a state of fear. They're overly stressed, and they are very sensitive to stress, and they're very, very overwhelmed. And so when we move this child into this home, what are we going to get? Well, we're going to get an explosion. Okay, so very quickly, how do we heal that? And that's really the word I want to use here, is heal, not behavioral change. The difference here is the perspective between just getting a child to change their behavior and to be appropriate and to be respectful and to do their chores and to do their homework and get up in the morning and go to school. That's very behaviorally based, but with a history like this of trauma, we have to change our thinking and shift to say, this is about helping a child heal. That's a lifelong opportunity that our children have rather than just changing a behavior. Because you all know that work with these kids, if you change one behavior, what's going to come up over here? Another behavior and another behavior. It's kind of like playing whack-a-mole. And until you get underneath it all, you're not going to be able to find the long-term ability to help this child heal at a really great level. The other thing is this, is that when I talk about that healing perspective, I also like to add in just what does that look like as a behavioral model or as a parenting model. We talk about being nurturing, loving, connected. You all know who this is, like Mr. Rogers. The minute you saw this, I heard the whole room go, ah, it completely regulated you. Now, the problem is our abilities are street smart, and they don't know what regulation feels like. And sometimes that regulation actually unwinds them because it's unfamiliar. And when a child does start to settle back down into more of that Andy range of regulation, it actually scares them. And then they can get actually worse in their behavior in the sense that they want to go back to the chaos. They go back to their original blueprints. They go back to what feels right and what is familiar. And so we can't be 100% Mr. Rogers. I hate to say this. What we have to add to the formula is a little bit of Patton. And by that, all my books are about how to combine these 2 modalities. And these are 2 extreme individuals. I mean, have you ever seen these 2 individuals on one screen together? They don't mix. But why are they extreme? Because Billy's extreme. Well, not really Billy's extreme. His history is extreme. And so you have to then approach children from these very, there's no middle ground, right? It's either hot or cold. It is a very intense process, but it is possible. And what I'm going to also talk about later on is more about how we get into the development about that. Because if Billy is 7 years old, think about those 7 years of development. What did he miss? He missed someone telling him stories at night. He missed feeling safe at night. He missed just, bath time and these fun things. And so developmentally, what we also have to do within this paradigm of support and love and connection, yet very strong boundaries, is we have to allow our children to go backwards, developmentally to go backwards. If you're going to build a 25-story building, are you going to start that building at the 5th floor? Well, that's insane. No, you're going to build a very strong foundation. And so to think about how we can go back developmentally, instead of at 7 years old moving forward to 8 years old, I want us to do the actual opposite, what our culture says, is to go backwards and go back to being a 2-year-old, going back to being a 3-year-old, because emotionally and socially, that's probably more where Billy is. In fact, sometimes we get kids that are more on the infantile spectrum. And so instead of pushing our kids forward, the healing for trauma is allowing then all that to kind of go backwards and regroup. If you're going down a road, this is my analogy, if you're going down a road, there's a bunch of potholes. Does that road just get better? No, the potholes get bigger and bigger and bigger until you fill them back in. Children don't grow out of trauma, they grow into trauma. And so we have to go backwards on that road, start filling in those potholes in order to smooth that journey so that they can then be able to move forward. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.